Welcome everyone. I've got an exciting presenter today in Tommy McCubbin. And just before we kick things off, I did want to, really say that we've enjoyed everyone tuning in over this last few weeks. We've had some great feedback, and I think we've got about three more presenters to go. But look, we have a wide mix of clients who are listening to these Zooms. So obviously, a key amount of our clients are in the office space that we provide here in Melbourne. We have some in Brisbane. We have some in Adelaide. We've also got some investors of ours who are more just investments on the residential real estate side of things. And I think we might even have our first international Hong Kong client tuning in today, who's just an investor of ours. So we'd like to welcome everyone. Really excited to introduce our fourth presenter, Tommy McCubbin. Firstly, Tommy's probably one of the longest, friends of the D group, and also myself. He's a very good friend of mine, and he first came and started working and advising the D group probably, I'm saying 21 years ago, which is a long time. And I suppose it's basically when I kicked off my career as well, and it was pretty much, I was doing the sales and leasing at number 1 Queens Road, and in came Tommy McCubbin and another friend of ours, Will Digby, under the Site Nights banner. We both spent many years there working hard and I suppose getting to learn both our crafts. So we've certainly been, he was working for us and doing a lot of our graphic design work, and he's been advising myself and the D group the whole way through. So we're excited to have him on today. Tommy's got a long list of achievements. He's a brand strategist, he's an innovator, he's an entrepreneur, and he's a seasoned presenter, including the likes of Pause Fest, and most recently, the creator of the host of the new Channel 9 show, The Rebound. He's created an award-winning podcast, Future Sandwich, and he thrives in new opportunities he creates in the tech and science world. So we really hope you enjoy this presentation today, Unpacking the Future. There's a little Q&A at the top there of the Zoom if you want to fire some questions through, and I'll shoot them back to Tommy for him to answer at the end of his prezzo. So, Tommy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Nice one. Thanks, John. Has been a long time when you think back to 21 years, bloody hell. Anyway, you gave me a great intro there. I reckon we can dive straight into these slides. I don't need to go too deep on my introduction, but I've changed the title of this presentation today, guys, from Unpacking the Future, which is a pretty arduous task in these times. No one really knows what 2 p.m. is going to look like, let alone in the future. So I just wanted to do a quick pivot and essentially just talk about this phenomenon which is happening here, which is I'm calling the Great Acceleration, and then how anyone, be it a sole entrepreneur or an enterprise business, can really exploit that and the changes that are going on, because it is a very unique time. As I say, John's given me a pretty good wrap at the start there, but aside from a career in advertising, working for the likes of the Clemenger Group and brands like NAB and Mercedes-Benz and that sort of thing, I've always been interested in technology, and one of the outputs of that passion was the Future Sandwich podcast, where each episode we cover off a trend. It might be driverless cars, AI, etc. And lucky enough to pick up winner of Best Tech Science and Gaming podcast a couple of years ago. So that's kind of led to this notion of presenting and things like that. So check that out. And then he also mentioned The Rebound, which is a show which has just been picked up by Channel 9, which is exciting, where it's helping small businesses rebound out of the pandemic. And I partner with my business partner, Steve Sammartino, who's essentially a futurist and pretty renowned speaker as well. And we give advice and show examples of how businesses have been able to exploit the opportunities which this terrible crisis has brought upon us. And there's another kind of wheel to me, in the sense that I've got a co-founded a company called Wellaware as well, where we've got a product which is in the health tech space, which helps you manage and understand your health, particularly around chronic disease. I'll go into that a little bit later, but I really wanted to dive into this. This is going to be quite fast paced. I've just got probably about 15 minutes because I'm quite keen to have a Q&A at the end. I reckon that's where the best stuff comes. So let's get into it. So Lenin, I haven't used many Russian leaders in presentations before, but he said it quite eloquently here. There are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. And that's exactly what is happening right now. There was a predicted exponentially steep curve of adoption of technology. Now, this pandemic has essentially forced us now to look at this forced adoption of a number of different technologies. I mean, look at us now. We're now in a professional environment talking across a Zoom call. I think that we've had to change our operations and our systems to really rely on technology. So what was predicted to be adopted in potentially as far as 5 to 10 years has been brought right up. And so we're seeing almost a decade of adoption happen literally in weeks and months. It's created new habits. We've all changed the way we go about stuff. I know my mum is now a fierce e-commerce player. She's been ordering all sorts of stuff. And frankly, 6 months ago, she would have been quite apprehensive about doing it. But now she's converted. And I think she's part of that 52% of increase in sales across Australia. And then also, since the pandemic hit, internet usage up 25%. Now, being optimistic and realistic, we are going to go back to a post-COVID world, but some of these new habits will die hard. I think that we're also in this period here where online and offline are the same. A lot of the time when I speak to my clients in consulting, they ask for a digital strategy. And my first response is, if you frame it up like that, you're kind of getting off on the wrong part, off to the wrong start. It's not like I have a digital life and I have an analog life. Digital is everything now. It's all one and the same. If we make stuff, we've got things like digital products. We've got software service products, which we can onboard tens of thousands of people in overnight and operationalize. We present ourselves digitally. We connect digitally, and we interact, and we can learn digitally. I think that there is no separation now between online and offline. And if we need to stop thinking that that's a bricks and mortar operation and this is a digital operation, they're totally mixed in together. And I think this has given us something very unique where everyone virtually on the planet has been forced just to stop moving at this insane pace that we have been, and stop and think about actually what we really want to do with our lives and do with ourselves, and actually call out things that we've kind of created bad habits around. And I think it's been an opportunity to reflect and actually have a look at how can we make the most of this? How can we turn this into an opportunity and not treat it as if it's a threat? Because in my opinion, there's never been a better time to bust through that wall of normal and essentially innovate. Now, look, there are a lot of businesses out there, unfortunately, and probably a lot of people on this call who've had to change their life and their careers and the way that they do business dramatically. And there's been a huge cost to that. But I think that there are tools that are available now, and there are ways to frame up markets and businesses where you can start innovations and you can find traction for really very little human and capital resource. And today, I'm going to go through potentially half a dozen examples of businesses who I believe are really exploiting this. And some of the businesses are very small businesses, but I think that the models that they've adopted are things that can scale all the way up to enterprise. And I've kind of framed it up like this. Now, conveniently, there are three kind of parts of these marketplaces that I refer to. Sometimes there might be 4 players in a marketplace or even 2. But these ones, essentially, I've spotted, or the entrepreneurs who have started these businesses have spotted that within this marketplace triangle, one of the players is getting stitched up and one of the other players is essentially taking all of the spoils. And I think that's the bit that if you see that going on, then there's room to go in and move. Basically, what I find is happening is this thing called intermediation, or this sort of direct to consumer. Now, previously, essentially, the concept of agency is doing what Bill's doing here, connecting a buyer and a seller and making that experience much easier. Now, technology has come in and intermediated that. You know, we've seen that with the likes of Uber. We can talk directly to a driver around the corner, or Airbnb, we go directly to the landlord or the host. Technology has replaced this notion of needing that person in the middle to usher the deal through in a lot of contexts. It's brought on this direct-to-consumer trend, which I think is really fascinating, and every business can exploit this. Here's just a snapshot of America. And again, a lot of these companies are actually here because of the ability to be able to scale technology so easily. You don't need to set up operations in other markets. You simply just need to have the ability to be online and then facilitate whichever emoji in that triangle you need on the ground. But this gives you an idea about the new businesses who are exploiting the direct to consumer trend. So I'll pick off a couple which are properly grassroots, but I think that there's, as I say, big business can learn from all of these. We look at hospitality. Now, they're under incredible distress at the moment, particularly in Victoria. I mean, it's a horrendous scene here for the hospitality industry here. And I think that, look, let's hope in 2021 that the government can actually keep the life support going and get them back on their feet. But something interesting is happening here, where I believe chefs are now starting to understand that they provide real value, and potentially inside of the context of a restaurant, there's a glass ceiling. The first example, to our friends in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, you may have heard of 1-800 Lasagna. Now, this guy basically made lasagna as a catering product. And just as it was just as the lockdown hit, he'd done a batch of lasagna, and he sent out a post on Instagram saying, I've got a ton of lasagna. Anyone who wants one, I'll just drop it around. And it blew up. And now he's actually got a business where he's got 3 cars driving around up to 25 lasagnas a night. And he's actually making more money from this operation than he was ever from the catering business. And he's just doing it in his Holden Marina. He's got dormant kitchens from restaurants where he's potentially scaling that. But it's an example of someone being super resourceful and really trying something that started almost from a beautiful mistake. Another person I'm connected with, she's a chef at a notable restaurant at the casino in Melbourne. And she's obviously been laid off. And she went home and she decided that, look, she's not going to sit around. She set up a she sent out a text to probably 20 friends and said, I'm going to cook something up on Saturday. Let me know if you'd like me to do a drop for you. She's doing up to 100 plates now out of her kitchen on a Friday and a Saturday. And she's probably earning 3 or 4x, she tells me, on what she would have been making as a chef. Now, the point here isn't that we need to start being this sort of grassroots, but the point is these are free tools and this is redundant time. And I think that there's this notion that I'm really excited about where the economy is bubbling up from the bottom. This isn't a top-down economy anymore. People can create real revenue for themselves and create enterprises with essentially free tools. And I think that these sort of stories are the sort of things, if you're in a big business, get a little crack team of people who have the energy and the passion and the understanding to try new things, and give them examples like this to say, go and start something. Light as many spot fires as you can, and the one that burns brightest, fan those flames. Because this is my point. There's never been a better time to innovate. And because that curve is coming closer and we're adopting technology and it's getting more and more entrenched in our lives, people are creating new habits the whole time. And your business idea or your alternative to your existing business model can actually float downstream with those new trends. All right, this next one it's definitely safe for work, but I wanted to just put this in here. This is a really fascinating story coming out of the porn industry. Now, I can feel the blood pressure rising in the D group right now. He's like, what's he going on about here? But granted, the porn industry basically created the internet today as we know it. They have been incredibly innovative, but something's been happening interestingly in the porn industry where it's been incredibly outbalanced. We've got the moguls at the top where there's basically 1 or 2 of them that own the entire industry and they make all of the money. The talent, use that term loosely, they don't make any money. They really have been stitched up with this current model. And essentially the punters have been getting the same ad model the whole time. Now, this billion-dollar industry has been unbreakable until this technology came out called OnlyFans. And there are a few other players in there now, but these guys have really nailed it. Now, what they've done is said, we understand that essentially the porn stars are not getting paid much. Let's let them talk directly to the fans and almost behave like girlfriends. So you subscribe to these guys and they send you messages and photos and all that sort of stuff. And their relationship has now gone from one of porn star to viewer. Now they're actually like behaving like boyfriend and girlfriend. And the industry has been totally shaken up by this. And I think this is a fascinating example of how a very basic piece of technology has come in and completely disrupted it, where two people who are getting hard done by in a marketplace have now actually got the ability to flip the industry and channel some of that revenue into themselves. So look, granted, it's probably a bit taboo to talk about this industry, but I really think it's a fascinating example of technology coming in and giving two marketplaces exactly what they need, and letting the greedy guy at the top get what's theirs. Another example, I've got a lot of experience in this in creative agencies, where essentially brands and marketers, assuming there's going to be a couple on this call, are getting asked to do more with less. They've got more channels that they need to put their message in. They've got more fragmented marketplaces that they need to talk to. It's a very hard time to be a marketer at the moment. And creative agencies, granted, a lot of them are doing some fringe stuff, but they haven't really changed their model. And you've got this underbelly of everyone with incredible tools in their hand to go out and create content and execute great ideas and essentially do what television's always wanted and create incredible content and incredible photography. And enter companies such as this, Creatively Squared, where now they're basically saying, let's let marketers go directly to this army of people who can go out and take beautiful photographs with incredible cameras. And let's just say what have we got there? We've got Bundaberg Ginger Beer. Bundaberg Ginger Beer put out a brief and say, go out and shoot this product in this way, send us your photographs and we'll pay you. And they end up getting this incredible content at a fraction of the price. But meanwhile, down in the bottom right-hand corner, the creatives, they're already doing this. So now that they just get to create their own enterprise, they're taking photographs, they're doing what they want to do, and they're actually making a decent living out of it. Now, there's always going to be a place for creative agencies strategically, but I think these are the sort of trends where, again, it's this bottom-up economy where you can essentially activate people at the bottom end of town. You don't need to wait for companies and brands to start things for you to actually find talent. Here's another one. So big tech have really come in and essentially dominated the publishing and media marketplace to a point where it's actually frightening, which we could probably talk about that for hours on end. And then down here in the bottom left-hand corner, you've got media and publishing. Now, there are a couple of big players who are doing okay, but there's definitely holes in the hole. And I think this is a trend where essentially they've had to cut back and cut back and cut back. So writers and creatives have been scaled back. So enter companies like Substack, where they've basically said, we're going to let writers create publications directly for their community. No middleman needed here. Start a newsletter, build your community, and make money from those subscriptions. Because there's money in niche. You don't need to have mass to make a fortune. Niche is really the new mass. And I think that properties like this are an example of someone saying, all these people are sitting at home with a cup of coffee on their desk, waiting for Fairfax or news to call them up and offer the job. And it's just not going to happen. And they're writing stuff on Facebook and Medium and all that sort of stuff. And it's just getting put on the internet and they're not actually getting any return on it. Whereas people are prepared to pay. And I think this is another example of looking at that triangle and saying, someone's unhappy that is really valuable, a major contributor in that triangle is unhappy and not getting remunerated for it. Let's create the facility for them to be able to do that. And on to the health sector. I think that, look, it's an incredibly trying time for everyone in the health sector, but the private sector has notoriously not been able to make a dent in it. And the public and the government, the public sector and the government have been so caught up in the front end that their priorities have been on essentially cure, not prevention, massively skewed the other way. And as a result, Australians kind of have a health literacy of where approximately 90% of us don't really understand our health. There's an analogy like we get our car serviced better than we get our own body serviced. And I think that between the private sector and the public sector, there's a lot of catching up to do for every sort of person to look after their own health and manage that, just like you would manage your own vehicle. And I think the frightening statistic is that 120,000 Aussies die every year from chronic disease. So heart disease, cancer, stroke, type 2 diabetes, etc. And of those, 70% can be prevented. So if they're detected early. So that led me to co-found Wellaware. It's a personalised health concierge. It helps you live a longer, healthier life. And we've basically worked with health organisations, the Cancer Council, Heart Foundation, etc., and the government with the federal minister, and basically packaged up all the content which is specific to me. So I tell the app how old I am, my family history of chronic disease, a little bit about my lifestyle. And then essentially it sets up a concierge service which says, hey, you need to look out for these sorts of things. And also you can book a GP. Here are the questions to ask your GP. And we've got fabulous ambassadors who give you everyday kind of missions that you can do where you learn more so we can make a dent in that health literacy. And again, it's just that notion of when you look at the triangle, you can see that we're not getting delivered the information that we need. And this is life-saving stuff. This isn't about having a girlfriend in California on OnlyFans. This is serious stuff. And I think that, so these are the sorts of, hopefully that the takeout from today is when you look at marketplaces and you see that some person is getting taken advantage of or not getting the value that they require, that's the place to zero in on. So yeah, I'm more than happy to give anyone a free trial of Wellaware. I'll shoot my details around, but jump onto wellaware.life and I'll hook you up. So just to wrap there, look for unbalanced marketplaces. As I said before, someone in that market is getting taken advantage of and the spoils are way up the top end. That's generally where the opportunity is. And also the tools have never been cheaper. You can start a website for free this afternoon. You can jump on and use WhatsApp like the chef. And you don't need permission to enter. Whether you're enterprise or whether you're a guy making lasagna in a catering company, you can really get out there and activate any kind of idea, get traction, and then scale from there. So with that, John, that's my last slide.
I'm just unmuting myself. Thank you very much, Tommy. That was good, and some very good examples. There's a couple of questions coming through. One question it's actually more. I think you've got to. If we're going to head back to the video here, but I had a question for you on, and this was just on general on the property. And I reckon we've spoken about this before, but I want to nearly put it out to some of the people listening about the property disruption of whether it's social media. And what I'm talking about is that with property and with selling property and leasing property, the only way at the moment is pretty much through a realestate.com or domain.com. And it's been the same thing nearly happening for 10 years. There's no new cool marketing things. And say when you're selling or launching an apartment development, there's a display suite and there's ads to drive that. And it's been really these same things. So I'm probably not asked for an answer on the spot here, but it's more something I think that I reckon that I would like to see some proper disruption of how that property is delivered and how it's sold, how it's leased.
Well, so, I mean, it's a proper duopoly, if you call that. I mean, REA has a very strong grip on it.
Yeah.
But that's the channel to market your product in, but you can tune your product within the context of how you present it to the market, right? Well, I mean, we've loosely spoken about this concept of, I believe now there's going to be breathing organizations where essentially, you won't have a fixed number of desks. You're going to plan around your organization needing to breathe as far as desk space. And so that sort of flexibility creates a whole new way to offer the product. So is REA the best place to actually, is that the best shelf to put your product on? And those sorts of things I think are interesting. It's going to be difficult to make a dent in REA. I reckon that if they keep going the way they're doing, it might head towards regulation, but not necessarily the next few years, no.
Yeah, they've got massive. Is that I've got a question around your podcasting. How did you start Future Sandwich? How did you start gaining traction and advice if you wanted to set up an actual podcast? Like how, if you're starting off with 2 people, and then at what stage do you sort of get momentum into being, obviously one of the great successful podcasts?
Yeah, I started out because I was in advertising full-time at the time, and I was just curious about how that whole world worked. And my advice would be just have the idea and just make one and put it up there. And as far as I think what was great about my podcast is I didn't have a huge number, but I had the right number of people. I think that my numbers were quite modest, but I remember people who I was like, wow, if they're connected to my podcast, this is a really great community I've built around my show. And just make sure that you keep coming back to what does success look like? Like you might just say, look, if I can just get these 100 people listening to this podcast, that's going to change my business because I've got a new channel to be a thought leader and do all this sort of stuff. If you're going out and saying you want to be Joe Rogan, that's a very different strategy. So my advice would be, A, just start and make sure you've got a very clear pitch that you can explain to anyone in 10 seconds what the idea is. And B, just know what success looks like and go, look, okay, well, where are those people? What are they doing? What's the best place to get in front of them? It might be that you need to do a call like this to invite people to be part of the podcast.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We've got one coming through. Okay. So this is from Pat Gallagher, I'm not sure if you can see that Q&A, but I'll read it out. What do you see as the number one fundamentally most important thing change businesses in Australia need to adopt and practice to be digitally ready and digitally fit?
Yeah, I reckon the most important thing, good question, Paddy, expecting good questions from you, mate. I reckon we've got to watch out for big tech. I think the Facebook and Google and Amazon have created incredible products for us, but the old saying of don't grow your vegetables in someone else's garden, they can change the rules on us at any point. So if we are selling something online, for example, let's make sure that we're not going all in on Amazon because they get access to our data. They can change the rules on us, just like Zuckerberg did. Remember the days of like us on Facebook and we'll provide all this value. And then one day we woke up and the Zucker basically changed the rules to say, if you want to access that audience, you've invested millions in building, now you have to pay us to reach them. That was an example of when they can change the rules on us. So own your data as much as you can. Own your community and make sure that no matter what big tech do, you are protected and you own your customer base and the channels that you can talk to them on.
Yeah. All right. Very good. And then we've got one from Alec Blacklaw, our speaker from last week. What's the best platform for creating a podcast?
I still think Spotify and iTunes are that you have to be there. They're kind of mandatories. Depending on the nicheness of what you want to talk about, there might be kind of sub-communities where that should live, but absolutely housekeeping has to be Spotify and iTunes.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, we had a question coming through from, which I thought it might have just come through from one of our clients over in California who's just messaged me, but I'm not sure if it's come up yet.
Here we go.
We might give him one more tick. But mate,
as far as California this afternoon. That's exciting.
Yes, that's been very insightful overall, and I think to see those examples and see the people changing in these times now, I think that's really where certainly Victoria is going to need to see a lot of. So I think some really good examples have been great. So I think let me see if I've got the question here. Hang on. All right. This is from Oliver Baker from San Diego in California. Thoughts on working from home revolution? After doing it for 4 months, we've lost more than we've gained. Organic connection, accountability, unplanned innovation. I'm predicting a massive snapback to the offices. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm really optimistic that face-to-face connections will be really precious, and essentially they're not going anywhere. We're going to need to meet people and interact with people in person a lot more, but we'll never go back to the way it was. That's kind of, now what level we go back to, I'm not quite sure, but I know that it's kind of like when you have a business lunch. It's kind of like that context of, this is important. We need to really get down to a different sort of context of engaging with each other. And I kind of feel like that's going to be always present in how we do business. So the office space is going to be, look, offices are looking more like homes and homes are looking more like offices. And I think that this notion of, there's going to be a blend. It's just going to be another room which we have access to go and do our business. And to answer your question, I reckon we won't ever go back to the way it was, but I feel like we're going to still have an absolute need for a space for us to go and meet in person for sure.
Yeah. And I'm obviously, being a big promoter of office space, I do think that certainly the younger generation are going to want to get back into office space and just really the social interaction. So we think that there's going to be a big swing back once we can. We've got another question come through from Will Digby. How is big data and all going to make an impact on consumers' experience in the future in terms of marketing? How targeted and how spooky will it get?
Yeah, people don't seem to care about privacy, which is really strange. I mean, we've only just seen Apple bring out that ad from like leading with privacy as a feature. And I just don't think we've cared about privacy on the whole. So when you say big data, I kind of think, look, the upside of big data is we are going to have a fabulous service offered to us, to people who execute against it differently. But the downside is obviously our privacy being exploited. And I think that, look, where you've seen the relationship with China and the US and just how big data is actually can be weaponized now. It's quite frightening when you think about it like that. But as a consumer, I think we need to pay more attention to the data that we put out there on the web, because our privacy is getting exposed. All you need to do is have a look at the richest companies in the world, and they're worth over $1 trillion because we've given them our data. It's kind of like when the colonists came here and they just put a rope around land and said, now that is now worth something. We own it. And the indigenous communities looked at it and said, we've just always thought it was just ours. But the relationship between the land, that analogy with land being the same as data, it's kind of like these companies in California have just put rope around our data and said, that's now worth something, and gone and done it. And we're kind of still waking up. So I think it's something we've got to pay attention to.
Yeah. All right. Right. I think that's it for the questions, but thanks very much. I think that was great. And I'm sure everyone enjoyed it. I know if you want any other further details from Tommy, you can email. I think there's a D Group marketing email there you can shoot through. So any other questions for Tommy or any further thoughts? I'm happy to chat. So thanks again, Tommy, and we appreciate your time.
Awesome. Cheers, John. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.